Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the MedTech Impact Podcast, where you get to hear from leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of medical technology. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn.
And we're your hosts of the show.
So today on the MedTech Impact Podcast, we're delighted to be joined by Joe Lane, CEO and founder of SafePath Medical. Joe, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Well, this is an absolute pleasure for us because you've got a really nice backstory that we were just touching on there, which we'll come on to later on. But before we get into anything like that, we do like to frame it for the audience. So please tell us, what is the big problem that SafePath Medical is looking to solve?
So needle stick injuries are still a prevalent issue within healthcare settings. And so what SafePath has done is created technology to protect users from needle stick injuries while they're using suture needles.
So let's think about this problem a little bit more. So needle stick injuries, what sort of types of injuries are you seeing? What are the outcomes from those injuries?
So the primary injuries, they come from either the suture needles or the syringe needles. And what happens is the practitioner using the needle will contact the patient with the needle and then contact their own skin and break their skin with the needle and potentially acquire infection. Seroconversion is relatively low depending on what the bloodborne pathogen is, but it is still a real and present risk. And we think we're doing our part to reach zero needle stick injuries across the industry.
And what types of infections would you normally see in those situations? I take it the Hep B, Hep C type.
Hep B, Hep C, HIV.
Yeah. And what about prevalence? How often is this happening? Because I can imagine in a hospital or care setting that needles, are very frequently used. So I can imagine this is happening quite a lot.
Yeah, and it's happening less than it did previously, now that there's federal law requiring safety devices to be used. But the numbers are anticipated to be somewhere between 400,000 to 1 million injuries a year. And unfortunately, many of them are unreported. Up to 90% are unreported. So it's still quite a problem and quite a concern for that frontline healthcare worker.
So Kyle, big problem, big risk. I can imagine this is something that's crying out for a great solution.
Yeah, no kidding. And Joe, we're super curious. How is SafePath solving these needle stick injuries and those types of problems within the hospital?
So what we did after understanding, how people suture, where they suture, when they suture, and what suture they reach for, we focused on a subset of users that secure catheters with suture. So catheter placed in the skin, suture is used to secure that. And still, suture is the gold standard for secure and very durable catheter stabilization. So what we've done is created a handheld device, single patient use, single trigger operation, and essentially it protects the needle or shields the needle from the user every point in the procedure except when the needle goes through the skin. So with that, that passive safety apparatus versus active, where you actually have to do something to make it safe, this happens automatically, and that protects the user, people in the room, and downstream staff, custodials, et cetera.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely have to provide that image for our audience, especially when we post this on LinkedIn, so everyone can kind of get a look and feel for what that device is all about. Maybe tell us a little bit more about the overall build and structure of this device, and a bit more about how it works.
Great. So I'm going to provide you a little of this.
Oh, nice. Yes,
okay.
That's what we want to see.
Yeah, so preloaded needle and suture, and it's applied sterile in a pouch. User never has to touch the needle, as they often do when they are suturing. Okay, so it's a single actuator that moves the needle back and forth between these two grips, and that enables the user to very easily place the suture, pull the needle out of the skin, and then very easily we can then tie suture and cut suture with this end. So what we really tried to achieve was a single trigger device versus most all the devices that are out there now that are used in laparoscopy, et cetera, they have two mechanisms, one to grip and release the needle and the other to rotate the needle. So I think we've solved a very interesting physics problem and a user interface problem at the same time.
Sure. It sounds like the user and the patient, are both benefiting, but tell us a little bit more about who's really benefiting from your solution.
And so the primary focus is the healthcare worker, the frontline worker that's handling the needles or being handed the needles or being present around the needles that are at the table. Okay, so what we try to do, we avoid the needle stick injuries, infection. They don't need to go for, post-injury prophylaxis. There's not lost work from time. There's no psychological duress, no interruption of workflow. So, there's so many benefits for that healthcare worker. The hospital is probably the next largest benefactor, where they save the significant cost savings because of the elimination of these needle stick injuries and the treatment. And then they're able to comply with federal law. So the Needle Stick Safety and Prevention Act of 2000 requires employers to provide safety devices when their employees are reasonably expected to be exposed to blood, sharps, et cetera. So it's again, I think it's a win-win for both those groups.
Really, it certainly sounds like that. And Richard, I know that when we think about that go-to-market strategy here, and of course, yeah, the patient is benefiting, but more importantly, the user, right, is protecting themselves from any needle stick injuries in the hospital, right? They're benefiting from less injuries, less infections. It just makes me think about what that go-to-market strategy looks like.
Yeah, clearly so many value propositions you're talking about there, Joe. Who is the first person that you'd like to get this in the hands of? Because again, clearly this could be used by many people in the healthcare setting, but who are you thinking about to get started? Who's the target audience?
So when we look at the two indications, one being laceration closure and the other being catheter securement that we've already discussed. When we look at catheter securement, and there are approximately 40 million catheters in the US every year that are secured with suture out of the approximately 1 billion catheters that are placed. So we're targeting cardiac anesthesiologists, intensivists, interventional radiologists, interventional cardiologists, and also the emergency department.
And when I look on your website, I see a long list of testimonials and feedback. Can you tell us a little bit more about, what that feedback's been like in terms of developing this in the healthcare professionals who are sort of getting to use this?
It's been helpful as far as when we introduce the product to new individuals, that we share that feedback and they feel a certain degree of comfort there. But I think from a development standpoint, it was critical to start receiving information and feedback early on in the process before we even assessed, did we build a company or not? And then once we build the company, it's like, well, what are the real user needs? And on and on. And during the development process, a lot of these comments came through loud and clear. So it was it's been a very helpful process. Great collaboration with industry, and the healthcare system.
That's great to hear, and a real nugget of advice for anyone who's thinking about starting this journey, Kyle, because I think getting that firsthand feedback before you go down this, what can be a potentially long road, is super important. Because, the regulatory side, the reimbursement side, you want to know there's a need for this product in the first place.
No kidding. I mean, that's pretty much the job of go-to-market strategy, right? Is determine, exactly where that problem is, who needs it the most, right? And make sure there's an actual business here and you have something that you can sell. So Joe, it sounds like, Richard mentioned some of these doctor testimonials. Where does your product stand right now? Is it approved in the market today then?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. The product has been FDA cleared with one type of suture, which tends to be, we'll call it the workhorse suture for catheter securement. And we have a current submission with the FDA to add additional suture types to broaden our set of indications. And and that's based on user feedback. We don't intend to have a SKU list, 2 pages long. We're really focused on hitting the major markets and the major users. And I comment that oftentimes people think that suturing is relegated to surgeons, and it's not necessarily, because they're the people, the specialties I mentioned, they're using suture every day, multiple times a day.
And what about, I guess, if your product's being sold today, what about the reimbursement side of the device?
So early on, actually during opportunity assessment, let's call it, we had a regulatory consultant and reimbursement consultant talk with us. And for the indication of catheter securement, which is often the catheter securement piece is a smaller part and less smaller cost component of a much larger procedure, such as a valve replacement, or other open chest procedures, cabbages, etc. So it's merely it's a cost, an unreimbursed cost within that program, whereas laceration closure does have reimbursement codes, and so it's interesting to have the same device reimbursable somewhere but not reimbursable other places.
That is super interesting, especially with the Prevention Act that you mentioned earlier on. You would think that if the healthcare, system, if they're going to require and expect hospitals to use safer, more effective suturing devices, you would think that, they'd be working hand in hand or wanting to see some sort of reimbursement for all areas of suturing, So I do find that quite interesting.
And I'm kind of fascinated when you showed the product there, and I would recommend to anyone who wants to see this, we'll share a clip online, but also just go to SafePath Medical, because this is clearly something that's had a lot of thought put into it, the ergonomics, the design features, but it makes me think that, that's clearly not easy to get to where you are now. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of those design challenges and building in the human factors to make it, what it is today.
Yeah, so let's, we can kind of fast forward through. We spoke to probably 40 physicians right up front, and everybody had a slightly different idea how the device had to be held and used and configured. And so once we got past that, then it was simply matching the ergonomics with all the physics that are inside that package, and small components, and as we have cams and slides and gears and springs, etc., that all come together to make this easy and in some cases really fun to use for some of the physicians. So but having the right engineering team, whether it's consultants, degreed engineers, non-degreed engineers, coming together and developing that was it was a lot of fun and very satisfying.
And we often talk about investment being a hard part of creating any medical device.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing, I think, is that you've managed to get some of those people who are giving the feedback. I think the physicians are also investing in your product. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how that's been in terms of fundraising.
Yeah, so it's been a big part of our fundraising. We have over 20 physician investors, and the thought was that they would be our first customers. And so not only having the money, not only having the validation, but then having commercial pathways. That was the idea. And then COVID came along and changed a few things, but anyway, we're doing well, and we're leveraging those those testimonials and the people that provided those, and we will continue to fund from high net worth individuals, because we feel that fits our business model the best.
Well, Kyle, it sounds like the company's in a really good place, and so kind of interested to know what lies ahead.
Yeah, I'm super interested too, Joe, because you were mentioning that your company, we're a Massachusetts-based team here, I guess, between Richard and I, and you're up in Amesbury, I believe. Tell us a little bit more about your headquarters and kind of what's going on there currently.
Yeah, sure. When I was introduced to the project, the physician, Dr. Travis Lau, a cardiac anesthesiologist, He had had a needle stick injury, came up with a concept for a safe technology, safe for everybody in the room, but also could effectively suture. And so he was introduced to M2D2. And so when I met him, I also used some of the M2D2 facilities and resources. So it was a great start there. Then we graduated from M2D2 and we ended up in Amesbury and an old mill building. And we have our lab, we have our office space, and we have manufacturing here. So yeah, excited to be vertical within Massachusetts, and it doesn't hurt that it's a quarter mile from my house. So
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. Well, yeah, let's talk about some of those future milestones, and it could relate to your current space today, your technology, your overall business. But, what is SafePath trying to accomplish or achieve over the next, say, 6 to 18 months?
So you're catching us at a time where we're about to raise some more capital. And with that capital, it's specifically focused, at expanding our commercial footprint. The number of users, number of quality users, and then also we're looking to use that capital to, really scale and optimize our manufacturing. And when I say optimize it relative to the stage we're at. So we're pretty much, I would say, pilot manufacturing, the same way we're pilot commercialization now. Yeah, exciting time. And yeah, talk to me in 4 months about the money raise.
Yeah, no problem. Well, I'm sure, we'll eventually get around to guilting you into share all of your personal contact details for all those folks with all the money to reach out. But I guess, but that's really exciting. So it sounds like, you've got some plans on scaling and growing this business and, getting more of your SafePath device into the hands of your doctors and customers. So really exciting stuff.
Yeah, I think exciting is the word. I'm thinking about that pathway ahead that you were just discussing there, and clearly you're going to be having a growing team. So thinking about that team, is there sort of any next key hires that you have in mind that you're lining up?
We do. I think in the focus will be on the customer facing hires. It's interesting. So when COVID came and we actually launched 2 months into COVID, and we thought, talking to all our experts, and that it was going to be a 2 to 3 month delay, maybe 4. And so we were very comfortable with the launch, and then everything shut down. So we had to release quite a bit of our team. And so some of them have stayed on as consultants, and I brought in some other consultants to keep us moving forward, meaningfully forward during this time. And with this capital raise, we'll be definitely focusing on shoring up our operations again, and also that as I said, the customer facing people. We want to have a few of those on board as well.
Well, it's really great to hear about another Massachusetts startup flying the flag and building a great product, and clearly success lies just around the corner. I feel like for this, because you've got so much of the foundations in place. I'm thinking, Kyle, there must have been a lot learned along such a journey to get to where they are today.
Yeah, Richard. And typically, Joe, what we hear from, a lot of, I guess, early stage technologies and smaller companies is, they're the ones that are really kind of being presented with all these surprises along the way. And typically what we do is we love to ask, what's maybe 1, 2, 3 pieces of advice, that you might be able to share with other folks out there that might want to start a medical device company or bring a medical technology to market. What advice do you have for them?
So a couple of quick points. In development, you really focus on what's absolutely important, meaning if you don't get past A, then B and C don't matter. So really make sure you get A down. And to that point, I said, to our team, and we agreed, we're going to build the device, and then we'll worry about a sharp needle, right? So so we didn't waste our time on a sharp needle, because if we didn't get the physics right, we wouldn't be able to, it didn't matter whether the needle was sharp or dull. I'd say don't be a small company with big company problems. A lot of advice out there is you have to do this, follow this blueprint, raise this much money. You have to have this team. Just keep focused on what you need to do as that small company, and then recognize, when you're not a small company anymore, start to grow there. And then the third really is, the right team is required to win. And that right team could look any different complexion at any stage, or as a response to a pandemic, or market currents. So always focus on that team, hire, fire wisely, and develop even the A+ players, keep developing them.
Yeah, no, that's great feedback. And I think, being worried about what's right in front of you, right? And not things that are in the future that don't matter yet, and really being intentional about the actions that you take every day. I mean, I think that's perfectly put. So, that's fantastic feedback. And Richard, I know we're always excited about what that big future looks like.
Yeah, I was just thinking when you were talking about one eye in the future, I mean, you must still in the back of your mind always be thinking a little bit further down the road about where you'd like the company to be. And I think, from when you originally came together to found this company, and, laying out that sort of vision, what was that? Has that changed? Where would you like the company to be in, say, 5 years' time from now?
So the focus has always been the same. I'm going to say the timeline was certainly longer, as it is in most cases. But the focus was that we would strive to be an independent, standalone company. And if we happen to be acquired someday, we're acquired. But without having the strength of good financials, good operations, good team, then I think you set yourself up for a potential big drop off a cliff if you're just counting on an acquisition. So 5 years from now, we're either running strong as an independent, or we're part of a bigger firm.
Well, I'm sure the future is bright given everything we've discussed today, Kyle. So excited to follow the journey. And yeah, maybe we'll have you back on and you can share more of that success further down the road.
Yeah. And now, Joe, we got to ask you, how do people get in touch with you? Because, there's going to be a lot of folks listening to this podcast, your story, that might want to help you and be a part of your journey and SafePath's journey, whether it's an engineer, whether it's a salesperson, whoever it might be, maybe an investor, right? Who wants to dig deep into those pockets. So what's the best way to get in touch with you?
So through the website, through LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, and if we provide contact information, then I can do that. But other than that, those are the two best ways.
Perfect.
Amazing. Well, Joe, this has been an absolute pleasure. Again, if anyone wants to go and see that product, recommend getting on the website, and we're excited to follow you.
Thank you. No, it's great to be able to talk about something that's important to us, and something we feel will make a big impact in the industry to a lot of healthcare workers. So, but thank you so much for the time to talk.
Awesome, Joe. Well, thanks again. And ladies and gentlemen, another huge thank you to Joe Lane, CEO and founder of SafePath Medical. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the MedTech Impact Podcast. I'm Kyle Cruz.
And I'm Richard Meiklejohn. Until next time, keep innovating.